This evening, as we gather in the gentle embrace of Evensong, we do so with reverence and remembrance for the music, to be sure, but more profoundly for the life and legacy of Karel Paukert, St. Paul's beloved organist and choirmaster emeritus, whose devotion to sacred music shaped the spiritual life of this parish for many decades. In the Anglican tradition, music is central to the worship life of the church, and those who lead it, organists and choir directors, are not only musicians, they become spiritual shepherds in their own right. With every anthem they choose, every hymn they lead, and every psalm they try their best to have chanted in a way that emphasizes the rhythmic delivery of the words. They draw us closer to the divine mystery. At the end of June, Karel's family, friends, fellow musicians, and St. Paul's parishioners will gather here to commend him formally into God's care and to share music and scripture that Karel himself chose or that has been chosen to reflect his Czech heritage or that will be drawn from the seemingly inexhaustible well of music that he loved and played. However, the end of June is still many weeks away, and we didn't want to wait until then to acknowledge the end of a remarkable life and career, a life and career that was inextricably tied to St. Paul's and to Cleveland. As I thought about what I might say this evening, I thought about how blessed I've been throughout my own life to have been surrounded by Anglican church music. In fact, I can't remember a time when I didn't have such music in my life. My father, a small-town doctor, was also an organist. We had an organ in our house, and most mornings I woke up to the sound of hymns. Dad filled in when Nellie Snell, a fellow of the American Guild of Organists and the organist at St. Augustine's, was away, and my father gathered a group of us boys and taught us what our treble voices were supposed to sound like. From the years right after college until now, some of my most valued mentors and colleagues have been organists and choir masters. Fred Burgomaster, who led the Cathedral Choir of Men and Boys at St. Paul's Cathedral in Buffalo and later at Christ Church Cathedral in Indianapolis. David Hurd, who was the organist at General Seminary when I was a student, an extraordinary musician who contributed hymns and service music to our hymnal 1982, and who continues to play at the Church of St. Mary the Virgin in New York City, Smoky Mary's. Bruce Neswick, who played in so many churches and has flunked retirement as badly as I have. Scott Hayes, who studied with Todd Wilson. Marty Rideout, who wrote All Things Necessary, a practical guide for Episcopal church musicians. Robert Rector, an Oberlin grad. Sarah Seidel, Kevin Wines, and now St. Paul's own Kevin Jones. You may never have heard some of these names. They may not mean anything to you, but they have meant everything in shaping who I am as a priest, how I approach worship, and what I am convinced heaven must be like. In fact, I'm inclined to think that if the music I've been talking about isn't what I hear when I arrive at the pearly gates, I may have ended up in that other place. What the musicians I've named have done for me, Karel Paukert may have done for you. People who lead church music do not merely read the notes on a page or, miracle of miracles, get their choirs to sing in tune. They lead hearts in worship. They coax beauty from ordinary moments, and sometimes they even turn rehearsals into minutes and hours that feed choristers' spirits and offer transcendence in the midst of our ordinary lives. Under their direction, the choirs they have led have often become families, sometimes imperfect, always passionate, who together do as ensembles what none of us can do alone: give voice to awe, lament, joy, and grace. Tonight, as we conclude this service and this season of Sunday Evensongs here at St. Paul's, we feel Karel's presence not only in memory, but in every note and phrase. His legacy lives on in the choirs he nurtured, the hymns he loved, and the countless lives he touched through his ministry of music. Our music will end tonight with Johannes Brahms' Mein Jesu, der du mich, My Jesus, who has called me or led me. It is the first of Brahms' set of 11 chorale preludes written near the end of his life. How fitting that we will end this service in honor of Karel, being reminded that Jesus is always calling us and that he has called Karel to his nearer presence. When one of St. Paul's former rectors heard about Karel's death, he said, "The heavenly chorus will never know what hit them." So I pray that the heavenly chorus, is adjusted to what they've gained by now, and that our sad and grateful hearts will adjust to our loss in God's good time and by God's good grace.
O Lord, in thee have I trusted, let me never be confounded. How do you even begin to sum up the life and legacy of a giant like Karel Paukert? Now that our dear Karel has departed this mortal life, many of us are swimming in glimpses, memories, and words of how his life intersected with ours. I am not here to speak of his greatness. I'm here to speak of the profound and revolutionary impact he had on each one of us. I think a lot of us resonate with this concept, and I think it is Karel's true legacy. Karel was a man of quiet intensity. It was palpable in the way he made music that his spirit was on a high boil just under the surface. This intensity nurtured his insatiable curiosity about music. It is why he commissioned numerous works during his tenure as curator of musical arts at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and championed new music as often as possible. He was constantly striving for the means with which to communicate his passion for learning and transformation. To me, this passionate intensity that issued forth from him was a tidal wave pulling you along with it, bettering you, challenging your thinking, and enabling your awareness of your place in the wider world. I first heard Karel perform when I was about 15 years old. I don't remember everything he played, but I do remember his Fantasy and Fugue on BACH by Liszt. In this piece, raw drama met with flawless technique to make an impression on a young budding organist. I remember also his improvisation that evening. I'd never heard anything like that before. It was thrilling and adventurous. This man's playing was wholly other. I didn't know it then, but 5 years later, I would become his student at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and thus begun my 45-year mentorship under the master. His teaching demeanor was much like his personal demeanor, usually quiet, yet fresh and inquisitive. He was only harsh with me once, and I deserved it. It became clear to me rather quickly that Karel Paukert was his own musician. He thought deeply about music in unique ways. This came through in the way he played and in the ideas that he planted in my consciousness. His journey early in life must have influenced everything he accomplished. Soviet occupation of his native country, the former Czechoslovakia, no doubt trained him to keep his thoughts largely to himself, shared quietly only with those of like mind. His escape from the East to the West was also a trip fraught with difficulties and setbacks. His character must have been unduly tested and strengthened by the sum of these experiences. I can only imagine that when he finally achieved personal freedom, his heart and soul, bottled up for so long, had no choice but to leap out and be heard. Many of us here today have had our lives forever changed by this man. We have our memories, we have our remembered joys, and yes, struggles. We knew him as performer, friend, mentor, teacher, leader, parent, and so much more. I have said to many, many people over the years that I think he was the finest musician I have ever known. He was not a perfect man. Which of us is? But this imperfect man allowed so many to experience his brilliant light and his endless energy of spirit, and I, for one, am forever grateful. Karel, the last thing you said to me before you died was, "Thank you." Oh no, my dear Metra, it is I who should say thank you. Rest in peace, dear friend, and may your presence live in us and in these stones and these halls for many decades to come.